All right, in this video, we'll be going over question 1 on your content check. A lot of teachers called it 5.1 because that's what matches in our notes, but we're going to be looking at this graph of g of x to answer these questions, okay? What I always encourage my students to do on their graphs first is if you do not see the vertical and horizontal asymptote, I might draw them in. So the first thing I notice is I have these two curves. Okay, then I'm going to try to go over as best I can, and I'm going to look to see what those two curves look like they're getting infinitely close to, but never actually touching. Okay, so when I kind of fill in my arrows, highlight my curves, I notice that it looks like on the x-axis, I have a vertical up and down asymptote going through the x value 3. That's what it looks like my curves are getting infinitely close to, going up and down. Then side to side, going through the y-axis, it looks like I have a horizontal asymptote going through the y value 2. If I look at my arrows, it looks like those arrows are getting infinitely close to both of those asymptotes. Okay, so I might honestly even start by writing the equations of the asymptotes first, since that's what I just drew in. For the equation of the vertical asymptote, again, that's my up and down line. Okay, I notice that that up and down line is going through the x-axis at 3. So I'm going to say the equation of that is x equals 3. Okay, and if I were to look at any point on that line, I can also see that all of those points have an x value of 3. Again, solidifying this idea that x equals 3 on that vertical line. Okay, similarly, when I look at my horizontal asymptote, that's my side-to-side line. Okay, and when I look at that side-to-side line, I notice that it's going through the y-axis at 2. So the equation of that asymptote should be y equals 2. Again, if I look at any point on that line, the y value of that point would be a 2. Okay, you don't necessarily need to draw all of those points on your graph, but that just helps us build a little bit more understanding of why we are labeling and the asymptotes with those equations. Okay, that is also going to help me figure out my domain and range. Okay, I know that whenever I say domain, I'm talking about all of the possible x values on a graph. Okay, or my eyes are looking forever left and forever right. When I look at the thing furthest to the left on this graph, I see this arrow that says it goes on and on forever. And when I look at the right, I see another arrow saying it goes on and on forever. So my brain wants to think that my domain goes from negative infinity to positive infinity because it goes forever left and forever right. However, there is one x value that does not exist on this graph, and that one x value is where that asymptote is. We drew a vertical asymptote through the x value 3, meaning we have to jump over that 3 to go from negative infinity to positive infinity. Okay, if we visualize that a little bit more on our graph, again, I can see that I'm going forever to the left. Oh, but then I have to pick up my pencil because I'm not going on that 3, and I'm going forever to the right. Okay, similarly, when I think of range, again, it looks like my graph is going forever down and forever up because I'm looking at all the y values. So my brain wants to say that my graph is going from negative infinity to positive infinity. However, we have to jump over the asymptote at y equals 2. 2 is the one y value that does not exist on this graph. So again, if we think about it like we're traveling from top to bottom, it looks like, oh, we're pointing forever down and we want to go up, but shoot, we have to jump over this horizontal asymptote at 2 before we continue going up. Okay, so a big thing to consider is I should see similar numbers in your domain as your vertical asymptote and numbers in your range that reflect the horizontal asymptote. Okay, the last thing we want to look at is this limit. Okay, this limit says as x approaches 3, and then I see a little plus sign. So let's dissect that. If x is approaching 3, again, this is the 3 that I'm talking about on the x-axis. So I'm saying what is happening to the function as the x values are getting closer to 3, and this plus sign tells me that I'm looking from the right. Okay, so I'm going to get another color highlighter. Okay. And if my eyes are starting on the right side of this graph and they're traveling to that asymptote at 3, my eyes end up going up forever, saying that my function is approaching positive infinity because it is going up forever.